The phone rang just as I was measuring coffee grounds into the filter. The smell of Colombian beans filling my Portland kitchen. I glanced at the screen, expecting Ivy. Instead, it was her wife. Anais rarely called me directly. And when she did, her voice carried a kind of rehearsed brightness, the way people sound when they're already imagining the impression they'll leave. "Laurel," she said, "we're hosting a very intimate dinner tomorrow evening in Lake Oswego. My parents arrived from Provence yesterday, and they're eager to meet you properly this time. Just family." I paused. The scoop suspended over the filter. "Just family," I repeated, trying to hear whether Ivy had been part of the decision. "Yes," Anais continued smoothly. "7:30 sharp, and please dress formally. My parents are very traditional. They value quiet dignity, you understand." Her phrasing was deliberate, as though she were instructing me on how not to embarrass her. "Of course," I said, placing the scoop down carefully. "I'll be there." "Wonderful. We'll see you then." She didn't ask if the time worked for me. She didn't mention Ivy. The line clicked dead before I could. I stood in the silence that followed, the coffee maker humming behind me, the kitchen suddenly smaller. On the wall above the counter hung a photograph I had taken decades ago, sunlight striking the Pont de Pierre in Bordeaux, the river glimmering like polished steel. I had lived there for 5 years, long before Anais entered our lives. 5 years of contracts, vineyards, and long conversations in fluent French. None of them knew. They had never asked. I touched the frame lightly, the glass cool beneath my fingertips, and let the memory settle like a stone in my chest. Back at the counter, the coffee dripped steadily, but the aroma no longer smelled inviting. Anaïs's words clung to me, sharp and dismissive, as if I were a burden to be managed rather than a guest to be welcomed. I poured the coffee into my cup, sat down at the table, and stared at the steam curling upward. Whatever tomorrow brought, it would not be as simple as a family dinner. It never was. The next evening, I drove south along the Willamette, the autumn light soft against the water. Lake Oswego's streets were too perfect, each lawn trimmed as if prepared for inspection. Houses standing in rows of practiced success. I parked at the edge of Ivy and Anaïs's driveway, smoothed the sleeve of my blazer, and walked to the door. Ivy opened it before I knocked. "Mom," she said, smiling, and wrapped her arms around me. For a moment I felt the warmth of the girl who used to curl into my lap with her picture books. She looked me over, eyes shining. "You look wonderful, distinguished. Your mother always said I cleaned up well." I told her, and stepped inside. The living room had been staged like a showroom. Crystal gleamed on the sideboard. Bordeaux bottles waited on silver trays. Anaïs was already positioned by her parents, as if arranging herself in a portrait. "Laurel," she said, the vowels carefully clipped. "You remember my parents, Etienne and Mireille." I nodded, shaking their hands, briefly, at the wedding. "Yes." Such a whirlwind that day. Mireille replied. Her pearls caught the light as she smiled thinly. "Bienvenue à Portland," I said in careful French. They blinked, surprised, though Anaïs quickly smoothed over the moment with a laugh that sounded rehearsed. We sat at the dining table, long and shining under the chandelier. The caterer poured the first course, a delicate soup that smelled of leeks and cream. Ivy tried to keep conversation light, asking about flights and vineyards. Anaïs added little flourishes, repeating each answer as if translating for me, though I had already understood. It didn't take long. Mireille leaned toward Etienne, lips barely moving. "Elle est un poids mort," she murmured. "Dead weight." Etienne's reply was quiet, but not inaudible. "Une relique, pauvre Ivy. Porter ça pour toujours. A relic, poor Ivy. Forced to carry her forever." Anaïs tilted her head and whispered, Elle ne comprend rien. She doesn't understand a word. I lifted my spoon calmly, let the soup warm my mouth, and nodded at Ivy when she asked if it needed more salt. It's perfect, I said. They went on, believing their little fortress of language protected them. Anais smirked, glancing at me like a teacher amused by a slow pupil. Mireille's eyes slid over my jacket, then back to her husband, lips curling with a phrase about appearances. Etienne spoke of old vines needing to be pulled before they drained the soil. Every sentence landed. I heard them all, and I kept eating. Every word notated silently, like lines entered into a ledger I had already begun. When the wine was poured, I lifted the glass, let it rest in my hand, and took only the smallest sip. Lovely, I said. The Bordeaux was rich, stone and plum on the tongue. Etienne raised his brows faintly, but said nothing. Ivy, glowing, missed the glances that passed between the others. She kept the evening moving, proud to be a gracious host. She didn't notice the verdicts being handed down in whispers. I noticed everything. I let myself into the house just after 10. The room's dark except for the lamp I'd left on by the window. The quiet felt heavier than usual, as if it had absorbed the words I had carried back from Lake Oswego. I set my purse on the chair, poured a glass of water, and went to my desk. The ledger waited there, a heavy book of cream pages I had used for years to keep my accounts. Tonight, it would serve another purpose. I opened it to a clean page and began to write in 2 neat columns, the French phrases on the left, their English equivalents on the right: un poids mort, dead weight; une relique, a relic. Elle ne comprend rien. She understands nothing. Each entry steadied me. Anger had no place on the page, only precision. As I wrote, memories rose unbidden the mornings in Bordeaux when I learned how to read contracts word by word, clause by clause, until even the smallest detail carried consequence. I remembered negotiating shipping terms that others dismissed as trivial, and watching as those terms determined the survival of a business. Patience, ink, and structure. Those had always outlasted arrogance. I closed the book softly, resting my hand on the cover as though sealing the insults inside. Shouting across a dinner table might have felt satisfying in the moment, but it would have changed nothing. Paper, on the other hand, had the power to reorder a room. The clock ticked past 11 as I pushed the ledger aside and reached for the phone. Marcus Pell was already at the corner table when I arrived, a stack of papers beside his coffee. He had always been early, even when we were young associates deciphering freight contracts in cramped offices. Age had lined his face but not dulled his sharpness. "You sounded calm," he said, sliding the stack toward me, which usually means you're planning something. I stirred my coffee slowly. Anaïs's parents own a vineyard in Provence. Small, respected, family-run. They believe it makes them untouchable. He tapped the top sheet. Then they've made mistakes. Their U.S. distributor floated them a bridge note last year convertible if covenants aren't met. A capital call is scheduled for next month to fund new tanks and compliance upgrades. If the call isn't covered, the note converts at a discount. The distributor is already nervous. I scanned the terms. The language familiar, almost comforting. Who holds the paper California distributor? Willing to sell if they can get their money back quickly. Too exposed. And minority shareholders. 2 cousins in Marseille. Small percentages. Both looking for liquidity. Their stakes plus the note would place any holder close to control. I leaned back, feeling the weight of the ledger still fresh in my mind. Then we make it simple. A clean LLC. Wyoming. No family names. I'll fund it. Marcus smiled faintly. You want quiet leverage, not noise. I want structure, I said. Paper that speaks without raising a voice. He pulled out a legal pad, already sketching the framework. Timberline Crest Holdings. Clean agent? Cheyenne address? We'll have the EIN by the end of the week. I nodded. The plan settled over me with the calm of inevitability. This was not anger. It was architecture. Build the foundation, shift the weight, and let gravity do the rest. By the time I left the cafe, the drizzle had started. I walked slowly, letting the damp air steady me. Every insult from the night before now had a place to land. Not in words shouted across a table, but in documents no one could ignore. At home, the ledger waited. I opened it again and added a final note. Timberline crest, begin. Ivy came by the next evening, unannounced, carrying a stack of drawings rolled under her arm. She set them on my kitchen table but didn't unroll them. Instead, she sat across from me, her hands restless on the rim of her mug. Mom, she said quietly, does Anais ever make you feel like you're not part of the room? I watched her carefully. Why do you ask? She exhaled, eyes fixed on the steam rising between us. At dinner, she kept repeating what her parents said, even when you responded directly. She does it with friends too. It's like she's translating, but you never asked her to. Sometimes she edits, leaves out what you actually said. I know she means well. Or maybe she just wants to control how people see us, but it makes you disappear. Her voice cracked on the last word. I reached across the table and touched her hand. And you. She hesitated. I let it happen. I tell myself it's easier than starting a fight. But I feel complicit. I don't stop her. Even when I know it's wrong. Silence stretched between us, heavy with things she hadn't yet named. Respect, I said finally, isn't something others hand you. It's a choice you enforce. If you don't set the terms, someone else will. Ivy's eyes filled, but she nodded. I'm tired of feeling like I'm watching my own life from the outside. I squeezed her hand once more. Then step in. No one can do it for you. She wiped her eyes with the edge of her sleeve and leaned back. Quieter, but steadier. The ledger waited in my study. But tonight, I closed the kitchen light, knowing the next entry was already forming. I reserved a private dining room at a quiet restaurant downtown, the kind of place that understood discretion. The request went under the name Timberline Crest Holdings. No hint of me. The reply from Etienne and Mireille was immediate acceptance, written in elegant script, noting their anticipation of meeting a serious American partner. I arrived early, letting the staff set a single glass of Burgundy at my place. I left it untouched, its weight a signal waiting to be discovered. At precisely 7:30, the door opened. Etienne and Mireille entered first, dressed as though they had stepped from a Bordeaux salon. Anais followed, every movement precise, a smile stretched tight. Ivy came last, her gaze searching mine with a question only she would understand. They paused when they saw me standing at the head of the table. Bonsoir, I said evenly, my French unhesitating, each syllable deliberate. Thank you for joining me. For a heartbeat. No one moved. Then Anais laughed too quickly. Laurel, what a surprise. We thought you would meet someone else. I said, gesturing to the chairs. Please, sit. The room carried a weight that hadn't existed in Lake Oswego. Then, they had whispered over my head, certain of my ignorance. Tonight, every word would meet its mark. Mireille's pearls shifted against her collar as she lowered herself into a chair. Etienne's eyes narrowed, calculating. Anais adjusted her napkin with nervous precision. Only Ivy, across the flowers, exhaled as though she had been holding her breath for weeks. I remained standing until each of them was seated. Then I took my chair at the head of the table, the untouched glass of Burgundy still waiting, its surface dark and steady. The stage had been set once before, but this time, it was mine. The waiter had barely set down the first course when I reached into my bag and drew out a single envelope, thick with folded pages. I placed it in the center of the table. the paper making the smallest sound against the linen. Etienne's eyes flicked to it, then back to me. Qu'est-ce que c'est proof? I said, my French steady, the words precise. Your first mistake was assuming I didn't understand. Your second was believing ignorance would last forever. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. I slid the envelope toward Etienne. His hand hesitated before he opened it, the pages trembling slightly as he read. Mireille leaned closer, her face tightening as her eyes caught the numbers. Anaïs craned her neck, eager, then froze when the columns became clear. 51.2%, I said. Before they could stumble through the arithmetic, Timberline Crest Holdings now holds the majority. The bridge note, the minority shares, the capital call, each answered, each recorded. Anaïs gave a brittle laugh. This isn't possible. I did not raise my voice at dinner, I interrupted, keeping my gaze on hers. I raised capital. That is what shifted the ground beneath your chairs. Mireille straightened, her pearls catching the candlelight. This is family. You cannot simply, I can, I replied. And I have. But I did not come here to destroy you. I came to set terms. Etienne slammed the folder shut, though his hands betrayed the tremor. You must give us time. This is not time was given, I said calmly. You chose not to see it. Anaïs pressed forward, voice rising. You're making a spectacle. Ivy, tell her this is madness. We don't need her. Ivy's voice cut in, quiet but firm. Stop. Anaïs blinked, startled. My daughter's eyes met mine across the table. Steady. Then she turned to the others, her French careful but clear. Le respect commence ici. Respect begins here. Her words fell into the silence like stones into deep water. Etienne's jaw tightened. Mireille looked down, and Anaïs stared at Ivy as though she were a stranger. I folded my hands neatly. The choice is yours. You may accept governance quarterly reporting, compliance, scholarships for agricultural students in Provence and Oregon, or you may sell cleanly, at a fair valuation. But the old order is finished. You do not get to whisper verdicts while others carry the weight. Mireille's lips parted, then closed again. Etienne leaned back, the envelope still under his hand, as though pressing it might shift the truth inside. Anaïs opened her mouth, then shut it, unable to find a script. I lifted my glass of Burgundy for the first time that night, let the wine touch my tongue, and set it back down without a word. The meal continued, though no one had an appetite. The plates cooled untouched, the waiters gliding in and out with the caution of men who sensed something invisible had already broken. Ivy's hand rested on the table, not reaching for mine, but steady in its presence. She had spoken, and that was enough. The ledger was no longer just mine. 2 mornings later, Anaïs appeared at my door without calling ahead, her blazer sharp enough to double as armor. She carried a folder under her arm, glossy proposals already tabbed. We can buy you out, she said, before I had even invited her in. A premium. You'll walk away with profit. Clean hands. No disruption. Everyone wins. I studied her, the way her voice strained against the gloss. This isn't a point to score, I said evenly. It's a principle. I didn't claim the majority to cash out. I claimed it to change the terms. Her eyes flashed. You can't run a French vineyard from Portland? I don't need to, I said. I only need to ensure it runs with integrity. She left in a flurry of expensive perfume, and for once, she didn't slam the door. By the end of the week, the first board call had convened. Compliance protocols were adopted. Financials circulated to all shareholders without delay. Marcus finalized the scholarship fund, one endowment for enology students in AX, another for Oregon State. The documents bore Etienne's signature, reluctant but present. Ivy stopped by often, though never with Anais. She spoke of pulling back, of needing time. One evening, she set a notebook on my table. "I'm thinking of studying contracts," she said. "If paper is what builds walls and opens doors, I want to learn the language." In the meantime, she had taken on a pro bono design project for a community clinic in North Portland. "It feels like breathing different air," she admitted, her shoulders lighter than I had seen in years. I looked at her across the table and felt the ledger's weight shift. For the first time, I wasn't carrying it alone. Weeks later, the evenings had turned crisp, the maple outside my window shedding leaves in a steady rhythm. Ivy came over with bread still warm from the bakery, her cheeks pink from the walk. I set soup on the stove, and we laid the table together. Just the two of us. While we ate, the courier arrived with a packet stamped from France. I slid it open with my knife and slid the papers across the table. Etienne's signature sat at the bottom of each compliance form, precise and reluctant. But there, beside them, was a short note from Mireille, written in her looping hand. It carried no apology, only a clipped acknowledgement. "Votre français était impeccable. We look forward to our next meeting." I folded the letter once and set it aside. Ivy raised her brows. "Polite, at least," she said. "Polite enough," I replied. After dinner, she unrolled a few sheets of her own. Lines of French verbs, carefully written, some misspelled but earnest. She stumbled through a phrase, and I corrected her pronunciation gently. She tried again. Slower, the words more certain this time. "Better," I said. She smiled, the kind that reached her eyes. "It feels different." Speaking it myself, like I'm finally stepping into the room, we poured 2 glasses of Pinot Noir from the Willamette Valley, the wine carrying the earth of our own soil. I lifted my glass. "To building tables that hold," I said. She clinked hers lightly against mine, "and to filling them with the right people." The house was quiet, except for our voices and the faint hum of the heater. No whispers, no translations, no verdicts spoken behind closed lips, just a mother and daughter, and the weight of truth resting where it belonged. Dignity, I thought, doesn't shout. It arranges the room so truth has weight, and then it holds steady.